So it's that time of the year where the sun goes down earlier and the nights are longer. So in today's video, I'm going to discuss a couple tips when it comes to shooting at night, and also discuss how to capture more meaningful photos after the sun goes down. Now, the first rule of photography is that you need light to take photos, and at nighttime, naturally, you have less light. So you're going to have to be more careful and mindful about where you're shooting, and when you find interesting locations with interesting light, you've got to slow down and really work those locations to get the most out of them. So finding interesting light is one thing, but taking interesting photos in those locations can be more challenging. First, and probably most obvious method, is to shoot into restaurants and shops. These are usually well lit and often have people inside too, which you can capture. Something I like to do is to find interesting angles and interesting ways to capture the people inside. Also, the same goes for taking photos of people inside buses and public transport and things like trains as well. Secondly, you can use street lights or lights coming from shops or even car lights to act as a spotlight on your subject. This usually works by the light coming from the shop or the street light illuminating the road, and then you wait for your subject to walk through that light. So when you take the shot, the subject is lit up, whereas the rest of the scene is darker. And you can get really creative here because the different types of light will create a different effect. Or if it's raining, for example, the light will bounce off the floor and illuminate your subject in a different way as well. Another thing you can do is by changing the angle you capture your subject, you can completely change how the photo looks. So if you're capturing your subject, let's say side on, they're walking towards you and they're being lit by the shop front, usually half of the subject's face will be lit up while the other side is dark. Or if you move around and you position yourself in front of the light and your subject walks in front, so they are essentially backlit by the light, they will appear like a silhouette in your photo. So simply by changing your angle and perspective, you can take many different photos and different types of shot from the same place and the same location. Finally, you can shoot more abstract photos by capturing the way the light bounces around the scene. For example, if you find a metallic reflective surface, you can capture the way light bounces off that, or if it's been raining, you can capture reflections in the puddles. So my advice is to find that interesting light and really get creative about how you position your subject, how you position yourself when you're capturing the subject, and also find different and interesting ways to capture the light in general. A really good way to add some emotion and some story to your photos is to include movement. Remember, your photos do not need to be technically perfect. There is a bit of an obsession with capturing sharp photos where everything has to be perfect and the settings have to be right. But to be honest, especially in street photography, my favorite photos tend to be the ones which are a bit blurry or a bit out of focus. Maybe there's a bit of movement there. For me, it makes the photo more realistic and I feel more of a connection to it. You have to remember, this isn't product photography, it's not portrait photography. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're out there to capture the streets, and the streets are rarely perfect. There's always a bit of mess, there's always a bit of craziness or some graffiti on the walls, and that can also be reflected in your photography as well. Now, if you read the textbooks, they all say to set your shutter speed at double your focal length. Now, this is true if you want to capture sharp images and so on, but if you want to capture movement in your photos, then bring that shutter speed all the way down to around 1/10 of a second up to 1/30th. And also set your aperture and ISO as low as possible. Something I see a lot with street photos taken at night is photographers capturing the scene either perfectly lit or edited to the point where it looks like a photo taken during the day. One of the main things to remember when you're shooting at nighttime is to capture the night and capture the darkness of night. For me, the best photos at night are the ones that capture that loneliness of nighttime, and in order to do that, you need darkness. So don't be afraid to have large areas of shadows in your images or large areas where there's just darkness. Not everything has to be perfectly lit, and the darkness itself can help tell a story or convey some kind of emotion. So when you go out to shoot, not everything in your scene needs to be perfectly lit. Your subject doesn't even need to be perfectly lit. And there's nothing wrong with capturing large areas of shadow, or in fact, if the majority of the photo is just darkness, that's completely fine. And if anything, the darkness and shadows really add more to your photo rather than having the entire scene perfectly lit. Next up, keep your gear and setup as simple as possible. Firstly, as you're walking around at nighttime, naturally it can be a bit more dangerous, and you probably don't want to be walking around with a massive camera bag and constantly changing massive lenses around. When you're doing street photography, you have to be aware of your surroundings, and depending on the location you're in, you may need to be more cautious. So usually when I head out to shoot, it's one camera, one lens. I don't listen to any music because I want to be fully aware of what's going on around me. And I usually dress in pretty dark or neutral clothing. Also, I recommend bringing a small bag with you, so when you're walking around, you can slip your camera into it, or if you ever start to feel unsafe, you can just slip the camera into your bag and it's out of sight, out of mind. Also, and this often gets missed, but if it's raining outside or if it's cold, dress appropriately. There's nothing worse than going out to shoot and half an hour into it, your feet are wet, you're freezing cold, and you're forced to go home. So remember to invest in some waterproof trainers and a waterproof jacket as well. Alright, so that's just some tips and advice for doing street photography at nighttime. I really hope this episode has inspired you to go out and shoot. If you have any questions about street photography at nighttime, drop them in the comments and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. As always, if you find this video helpful and you want to support this channel, you can hit the thumbs up button, and for more photography videos, hit the subscribe button as well. A big thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.